everyone, and welcome to Developer Tea, Episode 11. My name is Jonathan Cottrell, and I'm your host. And today, I interview Justin Weiss. Justin is a prolific Ruby developer, and he's also writing a book about Rails called Practicing Rails. In the interview, I decided to talk to Justin about why he chose Rails as the specific niche for his content publishing, and then we talk a little bit about why Justin likes Ruby so much. Justin also has a preview of his book available for free that we talk about at the end of the show. So I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I enjoyed interviewing Justin. Welcome to the show, Justin. I'm really excited that you're here, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about where you came from and all the stuff that you're doing. It seems like you're doing 100 different things. And before the show, we were talking a little bit, and I was asking him, "Hey, are you thinking about doing any screencasts?" and Justin was like, "Well, I've kind of got my plate full." So it seems like and that's true. You're putting out 100 different things. So I'd love to hear kind of where you came from and why you got into development.
Yeah, so in terms of getting into development, I mean, I've been running software, I guess, for as long as I can remember. Started with in the Apple IIe, designing levels and stuff for whatever game I was playing, that kind of thing. And so this has always kind of been a passion of mine, something that I've been really interested in. But I guess for the actual professional development, it was just kind of what I guess people think of the standard road. Went to school for CS, ended up getting an internship, ended up getting a full-time job, and then kind of moving on from there. In terms of the writing and stuff, I'd always kind of wanted to start a blog and everything. I was a huge fan of the Ruby blog ecosystem in like the 2007, 2008ish, and whenever I'd started, I just couldn't keep it going, and I could just never get a lot of interest in what I was writing, and so I'd have like these kind of fits and starts, which I guess is fairly common from what I've heard and people I've talked to.
Sure, yeah, and so for anyone who hasn't visited Justin's blog, it is located at let me make sure I get this right, justinweiss.com, which we'll put in the show notes. Justin's been writing in your year in review for 2014. You said you've basically been writing for about a year, right?
Yep.
And you've had over 1,000 people subscribe to your newsletter.
Yeah.
That's huge. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, I mean the best part of this whole thing has just been the people I've been able to talk to, the conversations I've had, that kind of thing through email. So I'm really happy about that.
In fact, the reason why Justin is even on the show today is because I've subscribed to his newsletter for quite a few weeks now, and I decided to just reach out to him because myself and a few people at work at Whiteboard we're all kind of following Justin and the things that he's doing. So if you don't know what Justin has been up to, he's writing a book. He doesn't have a official release date, right?
Right. Not quite yet, but it's soon.
But Practicing Rails, which will definitely be in the show notes as well. He's writing a book. He's talked at a conference this year. He's writing a new blog post every week, which these blog posts are not just like, hey, I've been thinking about this thing. It's like really well fleshed out, long form blog posts. And he did a guest spot on Ruby Tapas recently. Talk a little bit about that process and how you got involved with Avdi.
So Avdi and I have kind of talked a little bit through Twitter and comments and things like that. And he, I don't know if he just had a kid, and so he was trying to queue up a whole bunch of guest spots on Ruby Tapas so that he could spend some time with the newborn and everything.
That's great.
And so he kind of reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in doing a guest spot, and it sounded like a lot of fun. I've been a huge fan of his for a long time, and so he kind of let me choose a topic. I ran it by him, and he's like, "Yeah, just go ahead. It sounds like fun." So that was really cool. That was a great experience. I actually kind of approached it a similar way to how I approach writing a blog, where just did an outline, fleshed it out, came up with some code samples, and then went through the actual screencast recording.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm also a subscriber to Ruby Tapas, so I haven't gotten to your episode yet. I'm trying to go one at a time.
Yeah.
Which there's a lot of content there. It's pretty impressive. But
There really is.
But yeah, so all of this to kind of center around the basic fact that you've chosen Rails as kind of like the only constant in all of your work is Rails. I won't say the only constant. There's quality is a constant, I guess, but the kind of common factor is that you've chosen Rails. Can you talk a little bit about why? I know you mentioned the Ruby community, the blogging community, but can you explain a little bit more about why you chose Rails and and why anybody else would choose Rails if they're just starting out?
Yeah, so I love Ruby. I've loved Ruby since the first time I saw it. Coming from the previous work that I'd done in Java and everything, it was just kind of a total breath of fresh air. I was like everything I hated about Java was specifically addressed by the pleasure I felt like actually writing Ruby code.
That's awesome.
To the point where the last time that I switched jobs, like one of the requirements on my list was like I want to work someplace where I can work in Ruby professionally. So it's been something I've been interested in a long time. One of the things that I've also been really interested in the software development process and a lot of the books and things that were released in the early 2000s, the Kent Beck, the Martin Fowlers, all those types of things. And so I feel like a lot of those things can be applied to whichever language that you're currently working in at the time. But it's also a lot easier to write about something like that if you have a specific example to tie it to. If you're just talking about like, oh, this is what extract class looks like, and in this super abstract way, like nobody's going to understand it. But if you can actually say like, this is what the code looks like beforehand, this is what the code looks like after, it's a lot easier to grasp. And so there's a lot of the stuff on the blog that's not specific to Rails, but it uses Rails as a medium for transmitting for actually transmitting abstract concepts. And
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no worries. Yeah, it's and so that's kind of one of the reasons that almost everything is Rails, is because that's what I like writing in, and it's also a great way to try to communicate topics through real examples.
Yeah, and I've chosen Ruby as well as kind of my favorite language, at least at this moment. And it seems like Ruby has this unique quality to it that it's like the Acme language. Like it's the most basic version. It's almost pseudocode feeling in some ways. And so I feel like I can, like you're saying, explain these kind of more abstract concepts, and most people from any language could approach Ruby and say, oh, I know what that's doing because I've seen it before, with the exception of just a few things, like maybe blocks are a little bit hard to understand. But even those are like, once you've heard a single explanation of it, it's relatively easy to understand. Not necessarily relatively easy to write, but it's relatively easy to look at it and say, oh yeah, that reads like human language to me, which I think is necessary for a great programming language.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that originally made me fall in love with the language was reading about how the focus was absolutely like 100% on the programmer experience. And if that made it so that the interpreter was really, really complicated or really difficult to understand or really slow or wasn't just up to par with the other interpreters that were around at the time, so be it. Because it was not written for a computer; it's written for a human, and that just totally fit my way of thinking.
Yeah, that's great. And I've heard from some of the people who were there, kind of in the early days, is that like the idea that the concept behind Ruby is what you were just saying, which is it's built for developer happiness. Not just developer productivity, but developer happiness, which is just such a unique concept, So, well, awesome. So if you had kind of one takeaway, I know now you're working in more of a manager or managerial role than necessarily active development. But if you had one takeaway to both beginners and seasoned professionals who are just looking to become better developers, the people who are listening to this show are taking 10 minutes out of their day to try to cram in something that can provide like actionable value to their career or whether it's a hobby or whatever. What would you say if you just had 30 seconds to help these people become better developers?
So the agile process, it fits everything. The idea of learning what you should be doing, putting it into action as soon as humanly possible, evaluating it, so seeing like how this is better or worse than what you were doing before, and then going back to the beginning and trying to like figuring out how the new stuff that you're learning feeds back into that process to make you better. That's kind of the process I've followed in my own personal development, in the code that I write, in figuring out hey, is this a good place to refactor? Is this a bad place to refactor? Well, like put the code side by side and see which one is better, and then use what you learn there to inform your future refactorings. And so that just kind of like read, try, evaluate loop has just paid off hugely for me, and is really a fast and great way to become better at whatever it is that you're doing.
That's awesome. I couldn't agree more. Justin, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the insight that you've provided to people who are listening, and also, man, I just really appreciate the stuff that you're doing for people through your writing. And if you're listening to this show, you should also go and subscribe, like right now, at justinweiss.com. Again, it'll be in the show notes. If you don't know where the show notes are, they're at developert.com, and you'll find the show there in the most recent shows area. It'll be at the top of the list. And go and sign up for Justin's newsletter. And also look out for Practicing Rails. It's going to be coming out soonish, according to Justin. So look out for that, and it'll definitely provide some value, especially to people who are starting out learning Rails. Justin, again, I really appreciate your time. And if you have anything else to say to the listeners, now's the time.
All right. Well, yeah, I appreciate you having me. So with the Practicing Rails, I actually opened up early access to it for a discount until it's actually like finished and everything. And with that, you can get the current copy, which is pretty much content complete, just a few minor editing tweaks and that kind of thing that I want to make to it. And then you'll get the full copy as after it's released.
Great. Well, I'll be doing that today then, and
all right, cool.
Hopefully the people listening to this will also join me. Thanks so much, Justin.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Developer Tea. I hope you enjoyed this episode and the interview with Justin. Make sure you drop over to Justin's website at justinweiss.com. Sign up for his weekly newsletter where you get a ton of great content that's highly specific to Rails. And make sure that you also sign up for the preview of the book, Practicing Rails. Thank you for listening once again. I really appreciate all of the comments that you all have been sending me through email and on Twitter. If you want to reach out, you can reach me at Twitter at DeveloperT, or you can email me at developerT@gmail.com. There's also a contact form on the website at developerT.com. If you've been enjoying Developer Tea, and if you think that it provides valuable content to developers just like you, the best way that you can help other people find the show is to drop into iTunes and leave a review and a rating. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, enjoy your tea.